This isn't a story about how the Demon King was defeated. It's a story about what happens when the happily ever after runs out of time. And it starts with a funeral that would change an immortal soul forever. The story takes place in a sprawling high fantasy world that has finally found peace. For a decade, the hero's party composed of the knight Himmel, the priest Hyder, the dwarf warrior Eisen, and the elven mage Frieren traveled the lands to slay the Demon King. They succeeded. Now they are back at the royal capital, celebrated as the saviors of humanity. But here's the thing. While 10 years feels like an eternity to a human, to an elf like Frieren, who lives for millennia, it was basically a weekend trip. She is a mage of immense power, but her perception of time is her greatest curse. To her, the bonds she formed were fleeting, insignificant blips in a 1,000-year existence. Or at least, that's what she told herself before the sky began to cry. The party stands together one last time to watch the Era meteors, a celestial event that only happens once every 50 years. As the stars rain down, Himmel, the charismatic leader, looks at his friends with a smile that carries the weight of a man who knows his youth is fading. Frieren, looking exactly as she did the day they met, casually suggests they meet up again in 50 years to see the meteors from a better vantage point. She says it like she's asking to meet for coffee next Tuesday. She doesn't notice the slight flicker of sadness in Himmel's eyes as he agrees. She packs her bags and leaves, wandering the world alone in search of useless magic spells, completely oblivious to the fact that humans are made of glass and clockwork. But 50 years is a long time for a mortal, and the next time she returns to the capital, the hero she knew is gone. When Frieren arrives back at the city, she finds an old hunched-over man with a bald head and a long white beard. It's Himmel. The handsome hero has been ravaged by time, yet he greets her with the same warmth he had half a century ago. They gather the old team. Hyder is now a corrupt drinking holy man, and Eisen is a grumpier version of himself to watch the meteors one last time. It's a beautiful, quiet moment, but it's the calm before the emotional storm. Shortly after, Himmel passes away. As Frieren stands before his casket during the state funeral, she listens to the citizens wail for their lost savior, yet she stands there with a blank expression. The crowd whispers, calling her heartless. They don't understand that she simply hasn't processed the loss. But then, the realization hits her like a physical blow. She starts to cry. Not just a polite tear, but a soul-wrenching sob of pure regret. She realizes that she had 10 years of travel and 50 years of waiting to get to know Himmel, and she wasted every single second of it. She treated his life like a footnote in her own, and now that the book is closed, she can't go back and reread the chapters. This is the moment everything changes. Frieren decides that she will no longer let time slip through her fingers. She embarks on a new quest, not to kill a king, but to understand the human heart. But the world is a dangerous place, and she's not the only one who survived the war. 20 years pass in the blink of an eye for our elven mage, leading her to the doorstep of an aging Hyder. The once gluttonous priest is now on his deathbed, but he has one final request for his old friend. He's been looking after a young war orphan named Fern, a girl with a massive talent for magic and a heart hardened by loss. Hyder tries to trick Frieren into taking the girl as an apprentice, knowing that Frieren hates the idea of being tied down. He asks her to decipher a immortality spell from a holy book, a task that will take years. It's a transparent ploy to make Frieren stay and mentor Fern, and for the first time in her life, Frieren chooses to see the intent behind the lie. As the years of research go by, Frieren watches Fern grow from a shy child into a disciplined, powerful mage. She realizes that Hyder didn't want immortality for himself. He wanted to ensure that Fern had a future and that Frieren wouldn't be alone. When Hyder eventually breathes his last, Frieren doesn't make the same mistake she made with Himmel. She's there. She understands the weight of the moment. With Fern now by her side, Frieren decides to head to the northernmost point of the continent, the place where the Demon King's castle once stood, now known as Ende. Legend says it's the place where souls rest. She wants to talk to Himmel one more time, to say the things she was too cold to say when he was alive. But the path to the north is no longer the safe road they cleared 80 years ago. The remnants of the Demon King's army are stirring, and they remember the Frieren the Slayer who decimated their ranks. As Frieren and Fern set out on this pilgrimage of the soul, they encounter a world that has forgotten the faces of its saviors, but kept the scars of their battles. Frieren is teaching Fern magic, but Fern is teaching Frieren how to be human. However, Their journey is about to hit a massive roadblock. They reach a town where the memories of the past aren't just stories, they're still alive and hungry for revenge. What Frieren didn't know was that some sins of the past refuse to stay buried, and a legendary threat she thought she ended is about to cross her path again. The journey to the Northern Lands isn't just a walk through memory lane, it's a suicide mission through territory that has been festering with demonic malice for decades. Frieren and Fern quickly realize that while they have the magical firepower to level a mountain, they lack something essential for survival, a vanguard. A mage is a glass cannon deadly from a distance, but fragile the moment a blade gets close. To reach the resting place of souls, they need a warrior who can stare death in the eye without blinking. This leads them to a quiet village terrorized by a massive solar dragon, where a young man named Stark has been playing the role of a local hero for years. On the surface, Stark looks like the perfect successor to Eisen, the dwarf warrior of the original party. He's got the build, the massive axe, and the reputation. But the moment Frieren looks into his eyes, she sees something that most villagers missed: absolute paralyzing terror. Stark is a fraud, or so he thinks. He hasn't actually fought the dragon. He's just been standing there, vibrating with fear, and the dragon, confused by his sheer presence, hasn't attacked yet. When Frieren asks him to help them slay the beast, Stark breaks down, confessing that he's a coward who ran away from his master, Eisen. But Frieren, with her centuries of observation, sees the truth. She sees the deep craters in the forest where Stark has been training every single night until his hands bled. She knows that true bravery isn't the absence of fear, but the ability to act while your legs are shaking. This is the first major escalation of their journey. As the dragon descends, Stark finally stops running. In a flash of steel and a roar of effort, he cleaves the beast in two with a single earth-shattering blow. The coward is a monster in his own right, and with the trio finally complete, they head toward the walled city of Granat. But what they find there isn't a welcome party, it's a diplomatic nightmare that's about to turn into a bloodbath. As they enter the city, Frieren immediately senses a foul, suffocating presence. Standing in the middle of the town square, surrounded by human guards, are three demons. They aren't attacking. They are negotiating a peace treaty. The townspeople, weary of war, are actually considering it. But Frieren doesn't wait for a greeting. Without a word of warning, she raises her staff and prepares to blast the lead demon into oblivion. To her, there's no such thing as a peaceful demon. To a demon, words are just tools used to deceive prey. The guards tackle her, throwing the legendary mage into a cold, dark dungeon for disturbing the peace. But this was exactly what the demons wanted. They believe they've neutralized the threat. What they don't realize is that Frieren wasn't being reckless. She was being surgical. She knows that Aura, the guillotine, one of the 7 sages of destruction, is hovering nearby, waiting to harvest the souls of the entire city. While Frieren sits in her cell, the lead demon, Lugner, realizes who he's dealing with. He recognizes the mana signature. He realizes that the little elf girl in the dungeon is the same woman who slaughtered his kind by the thousands 80 years ago. The atmosphere shifts from political tension to pure, unadulterated horror. Lugner sends his assassins to finish her off in the dark, but he vastly underestimated the gap in power. Frieren doesn't even break a sweat as she dismantles the assassins and walks out of the prison like she owns the place. Meanwhile, Fern and Stark are forced into their own baptism by fire. Fern finds herself locked in a high-speed magical duel with Lugner, while Stark is forced to face Line, a demon who mimics the fighting style of his own master, Eisen. The pacing ramps up to a breaking point. This isn't just a skirmish, it's a desperate struggle for the next generation to prove they can survive in Frieren's world. But the real heart of this nightmare is taking place on the outskirts of the city. Frieren walks out into the misty woods to find Aura the Guillotine waiting for her. Aura is a demon of immense power who carries the scales of obedience. The rules are simple and terrifying. Whoever has the higher mana wins. If Aura's mana outweighs her opponent's, she gains total control over their body and forces them to decapitate themselves. Aura has lived for 500 years and has accumulated a vast ocean of mana. She looks at Frieren and sees a mage who seems average. Aura is confident. She's smug. She's already picturing Frieren's head rolling on the grass. She places their souls on the scales, and for a moment it looks like the hero of the past has finally met her match. But this is where the Slayer earns her name. What Aura didn't know, what no demon could ever comprehend, was that Frieren has been practicing a technique of absolute mana suppression for nearly 1,000 years. Every second of every day, Frieren hides her true power, making herself look weak to bait demons into a false sense of security. It's a trick that takes a level of discipline that would drive a human insane. As the scales begin to tip, Frieren finally lets go. She releases the seal on her mana, and the forest literally shakes from the pressure. Aura's eyes widen in a look of pure, primal terror as the scale slams down on Frieren's side. The average mage is actually a god walking among mortals. Frieren doesn't offer a speech about justice or friendship. She doesn't even look angry. With a voice as cold as the northern ice, she gives Aura a single, final command: Aura, kill yourself. The scene is hauntingly quiet. Under the absolute weight of the scales of obedience, Aura's own hand betrays her. She draws her blade, her eyes filling with tears of biological fear, and slides the steel across her own neck. The threat that loomed over the city for decades is ended in a matter of seconds. As the demon's body turns to ash, Frieren simply turns and walks away. She has won the battle, but the war for her own soul is far from over. Fern and Stark emerge victorious from their own fights, bruised and bloodied, but alive. They've survived their first real encounter with the Sages of Destruction, but the realization of just how dangerous their mentor truly is begins to sink in. They aren't just traveling with a mage. They are traveling with a force of nature that the world has forgotten how to fear. The victory at Granat secures the region, but it also paints a massive target on their backs. Word will spread that the Slayer has returned. As they pack their bags to continue the journey north, Frieren looks at her young apprentices and sees a flicker of the old party in them. She sees Himmel's kindness in Stark and Hyder's stern potential in Fern. But the road ahead is blocked by more than just demons. To move further north, they need a first-class mage certification, a title that is almost impossible to obtain. This means they must enter the mage exams, a brutal, multi-stage competition where the deadliest mages in the world gather to prove their worth. And little does Frieren know, she's about to meet someone from her even more distant, past someone who knows the secrets of the era before the hero's party was even born. If you thought fighting demons was the hardest thing Frieren had to face, you've never met a room full of ambitious, power-hungry mages. To reach the northernmost tip of the continent, Frieren and Fern have no choice. They need a first-class mage certification. But there's a catch. Out of the hundreds of elite mages who apply, it's common for absolutely zero to pass. This isn't just a test of knowledge. It's a meat grinder designed to weed out the weak, the slow, and the unlucky. As Frieren and Fern step into the magic city of Oysterst, they aren't greeted as legends. Instead, they are treated like just another pair of casualties in waiting. The air is thick with the scent of ozone and ego, and Frieren quickly realizes that the peaceful era she helped create has birthed a new generation of mages who view magic as a weapon of war rather than a tool of wonder. This is where the real game begins, and the first rule is simple. Survival is the only grade that matters. The story shifts its focus to the Continental Magic Association, an organization that governs all mages with an iron fist. The world has changed. Magic is no longer a rare mystical art, but a regulated profession. Frieren, who learned magic from the legendary Great Mage Flam herself, is a relic of a forgotten age. Her protagonist status means nothing here. To the examiners, she's just an unranked elf with a dusty staff. The world of Oysterst is a sprawling metropolis of libraries and dueling pits, a place where the status of a first-class mage grants you the right to meet the living legend Serie, mage even older and more powerful than Frieren. But to get that meeting, they have to survive 3 stages of hell. And the first stage is designed to turn the candidates against each other in a desperate hunt for a tiny, nearly invisible bird called a still. The candidates are split into 3-person cells, and this is where the dynamic gets explosive. Fern is paired with Ubel, a sociopathic mage who can cut anything she can imagine, and Land, a man who isn't even physically present but is using advanced clones to take the test. Frieren, meanwhile, is stuck with Can and Lewin, 2 childhood rivals who spend more time bickering than casting spells. The goal seems simple: catch a steal and keep it until the sun sets. But these birds are faster than sound and sensitive to the slightest trace of mana. What follows is a tactical nightmare. While other teams try to use brute force, Frieren realizes that the only way to win is to think like the prey. But they aren't just fighting the birds, they're being hunted by other teams who would rather steal a bird than catch one. And this is where the first drop of blood hits the floor. A veteran mage named Dankin, a man who has survived decades of political and literal warfare, sets his sights on Frieren's team. He doesn't care about fair play. He wants results. Dankin's team corners Ken and Lewin, using a massive high-level barrier to trap them while they attempt to seize the bird. For a moment, it looks like Frieren is outmatched. Dankin is a master of modern combat, magic fast, efficient, and lethal. He mocks Frieren's old-fashioned style, believing that her era has passed. But what he didn't know was that Frieren doesn't just use magic. She understands the very fabric of it. While Dankin is busy boasting, Frieren is silently analyzing the molecular structure of the unbreakable barrier surrounding the entire exam grounds. This is the moment the scales tip. With a casual flick of her staff, Frieren does the impossible. She shatters the grand barrier created by the association's top mages. It's like watching someone break a diamond with a feather. The sudden influx of rain, which can manipulate, turns the tide of the battle instantly. Frieren doesn't even need to use her legendary Slayer spells. She simply gives her teammates the environment they need to win. Ken and Lewin, inspired by Frieren's calm dominance, unleash a torrent of water magic that overwhelms Dankin's squad. The lesson is clear. You can have all the modern techniques in the world, but you can't beat someone who knows the fundamental laws of the universe. However, as the sun begins to set, the victory feels hollow. The first test was just a filter. The real horror is waiting in the shadows of the next stage. The second test takes them deep underground into the labyrinth of the Tomb of the King. It's a classic dungeon crawl, but with a terrifying twist. The dungeon is protected by a mythical monster that creates perfect mirror clones of anyone who enters. These aren't just illusions, they are physical entities with the exact same power, memories, and combat instincts as the originals. As the candidates descend, they find themselves face to face with their own reflections. Imagine having to fight a version of yourself that knows every trick you're about to pull. The tension is suffocating. Teams are being picked off one by one, murdered by their own shadows. And then, the ultimate disaster strikes. At the heart of the dungeon, blocking the final door, is a clone of the most dangerous mage in history, Frieren. The sight of the Frieren clone sends a shockwave of despair through the remaining candidates. How do you kill an immortal who has spent 1,000 years perfecting the art of magical execution? The clone doesn't hesitate. It unleashes a barrage of spells so dense and complex that the air itself begins to burn. Fern, Dankin, and the others are trapped. This is the ultimate event reaction escalation. The event is the appearance of a god-tier boss. The reaction is total panic. And the escalation is the realization that if they don't find a way to kill the Slayer, they will all die in this hole. But Frieren, the real one, stands there with a faint, nostalgic smile. She knows her own weaknesses better than anyone, but she also knows that she taught Fern everything she knows for a reason. The strategy they devise is a high-stakes gamble that relies on a single split-second opening. While the other mages provide a diversion, Fern is tasked with the impossible, landing a lethal blow on her own master. The battle that follows is a cinematic masterpiece of light and destruction. The clone is a machine of pure logic, but Fern has something the clone lacks: the unpredictable spark of human intuition. As the dust settles and the dungeon walls crumble, we see the true depth of the bond between the elf and her apprentice. But even after overcoming their own reflections, a final hurdle remains. The third test isn't a battle of spells, it's a battle of wills. They must face Serie, the living ancestor of all mages, who has a personal grudge against Frieren's philosophy of useless magic. The terrifying thing about reaching the top of the mountain isn't the climb, it's realizing that the person already standing there doesn't think you deserve to breathe the same air. As the dust settles in the labyrinth of the Tomb of the King, the broken fragments of the Frieren clone dissipate into nothingness, leaving the remaining mages exhausted and trembling. They had done the impossible, they had killed the Slayer. But while the other candidates are celebrating their survival, Frieren is looking at Fern with a mixture of pride and a haunting realization. Fern didn't just land a hit, she found a gap in a 1,000-year-old defense that even the Demon King couldn't exploit. But this victory wasn't the end of the exam. It was merely the invitation to meet the woman who sits at the apex of the magical world, the great mage Serie. And this is where the test stops being about survival and starts being about the very nature of the soul. The story shifts to the final stage of the first-class mage exam, a simple one-on-one interview with Serie. But calling it an interview is like calling a hurricane a light breeze. Serie is a living grimoire from the age of myths, a woman who views magic as a weapon of absolute dominance. To her, magic is a tool for those with the heights of ambition, and she has no patience for those who treat it as anything less. As the candidates enter her presence one by one, they are crushed by the sheer weight of her mana. She doesn't need to cast a spell, she simply looks at them and sees their limitations. Most mages fail the moment they step into the room, their spirits breaking before they can even speak. But Serie wasn't just testing their power, she was looking for a specific kind of hunger. And that was the one thing Frieren never had. When Frieren finally walks into the garden to face her ancient peer, the atmosphere is freezing. These two have known each other for centuries, and they represent two completely different philosophies of life. Serie offers Frieren any spell she desires, the kind of legendary, world-ending magic that people would kill for. But Frieren, with her typical nonchalant expression, asks for a spell that turns a field into a flower bed. It's a slap in the face to everything Serie stands for. To Serie, Frieren is a failure because she treats magic as a hobby, a way to pass the time rather than a way to conquer it. This is the moment the tension reaches a breaking point. Serie declares Frieren a failure, banning her from the Magic Association for 1,000 years. It's a shocking turn of events for the woman who saved the world, but Frieren doesn't even blink. She knows something Serie has forgotten. The most powerful magic isn't the one that destroys, but the one that remembers. But the real shock comes when Fern enters the room. Up until this point, Serie has treated everyone like insects. But the moment Fern walks in, the air in the room changes. Serie doesn't see a shy apprentice. She sees a black hole. She notices that Fern is doing something impossible. She is instinctively suppressing her mana with the same terrifying precision as Frieren, but with an even greater potential for growth. For the first time in centuries, the god of magic feels a genuine chill. Serie offers Fern the chance to become her direct apprentice, promising her power that would make her the most feared mage in history. It's the ultimate temptation. But Fern, without a second of hesitation, turns her back on the legend. She chooses Frieren's useless flower magic over Serie's perfect destruction. This is the ultimate escalation of the arc. The student has surpassed the master's expectations, and the world's most powerful mage is left standing alone in her garden, rejected by a human girl who just wants to see the sunrise with her friends. With the exams finally over and the first-class certifications in hand, the trio prepares to leave Oysterst. But the city doesn't let them go without one last reminder of the weight they carry. Dinkin, the veteran mage who fought Frieren in the first round, approaches them. He isn't looking for a fight, he's looking for closure. He reveals that his obsession with becoming a first-class mage was never about power. It was about getting permission to return to his hometown, a place currently occupied by a demon he couldn't defeat. It's a mirror to Frieren's own journey. Everyone is fighting for a rest they haven't earned yet. As they walk through the gates and head further north, the landscape begins to change. The lush forests of the south give way to the brutal, unforgiving winters of the northern plateau. And this is where the physical journey catches up to the emotional one. The pacing slows down as the group enters a land of eternal snow, but the tension never truly leaves. They are forced to stay in a small mountain cabin for months, waiting out a blizzard that could freeze the blood in their veins. In these quiet moments, we see the true growth of the party. Stark is no longer the trembling boy from the village. He's the one chopping wood and protecting the perimeter. Fern is no longer just a student. She's the one managing their supplies and keeping their spirits up. And Frieren? She's finally learning to be present. She spends her time looking for a spell that can get stubborn grease off a pan, or clear a path through snow. To anyone else, it's a waste of time. But to Frieren, these are the spells that make life worth living. What she didn't know was that this peaceful domesticity was the calm before the ultimate storm. As the winter begins to thaw, they reach the edge of the world. They are now in the territory of the sages of destruction that even the heroes' party struggled to contain. The air feels different here. It smells of old blood and ancient dormant spells. But Frieren doesn't feel the weight of the past anymore. She feels light. She looks at Fern and Stark and realizes that she didn't just find replacements for her old friends. She found a new reason to keep living for the next 1,000 years. The resolution of this journey isn't found in a grand battle or a treasure chest. It's found in a quiet moment at the very edge of the Oriole. She doesn't need a spell to talk to the dead anymore. She finally understands that Himmel was never truly gone. He was in every sunrise she watched, every useless spell she learned, and every time she showed kindness to a stranger. She speaks into the wind a simple thank you that carries more weight than any legendary incantation. The cold, detached elf who couldn't shed a tear at a funeral has finally become a woman who knows the value of a single human life. The quest to understand the human heart is far from over, but for the first time in a millennium, Frieren is no longer afraid of the dark. The final state of our protagonist is one of quiet, determined peace. She turns back to Fern and Stark, who are waiting for her by the campfire. They are her family now. They represent the journey beyond that the title promised. They've conquered demons, survived the deadliest exams in history, and stared down their own shadows. As they prepare to make the long trek back down the mountain, Frieren realizes that the end of one story is always just the prologue for the next. The world is still full of magic, mysteries, and useless things worth discovering. And this time, she's going to make sure she doesn't miss a single second of it. Frieren's first season has come to an end, but the legend of the Slayer is only just beginning. They've reached the edge of the world, but there are still sages of destruction lurking in the shadows, and a secret about the great mage Flam that could change the history of magic forever. What lies beyond the land of souls? And what happens when the world realizes that the immortal elf isn't just a relic of the past, but the architect of the future? Don't miss a single beat of this epic journey. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because the next adventure is going to be even more legendary. Until next time, remember, even the longest life is just a collection of small, beautiful moments. Make yours count.